Okay, so once you've found all of your component costs of capital, then what you need to do is set up a schedule like this, where it shows basically what you'll end up with in the case also is 3 different WACC levels depending on how much money you need. And the first thing you need to do is find what's called a break point, which is simply at what point do we use up all of our retained earnings, or at what point do we use up all of our cheap debt and have to issue more expensive debt. So to find a break point, you just take for retained earnings, you take the amount of new retained earnings a company has, divide it by the capital structure percentage that common equity makes up, and you get what's called the break point. So what this means is that if the company needs $72 million for its capital budget, half of its capital budget comes from common equity. So if it needs half of its money from common equity, that would just use up all of its retained earnings. And if it uses up all of its retained earnings, it then has to issue new common stock, which, as we saw a minute ago, costs a little bit more than retained earnings. And then you do the same thing for debt. This $54 million is how much debt it can issue at that certain percentage. Anything above $54 million in debt is going to cost the company more. So you do the same thing. Take the amount of cheap debt, divide it by the capital structure percentage of debt, and you get the debt break point. So if the company needs $120 million to fund all of its projects, 45% of that is $54 million, so that would just use up all of its cheap debt. If it needs more than $120 million, then it's going to have to issue more expensive debt at a higher cost. So then you set up a schedule where you start at 0, so from $0 to the first breakpoint amount, all of your component costs, cost of debt, preferred stock, and common equity are at the low levels. This is your cost of your cheaper debt, this is your cost of preferred stock, and this is the cost of retained earnings, because at this level you've just used up all of your retained earnings. And that's what this breakdown in funds kind of shows. It shows that yeah, we've used up all of our retained earnings, so anything above $72 million we're going to have to issue new common stock, which is what the next level does. So from $72 million, $1 up to the next break point, the debt break point, debt is still at its cheap amount. We haven't gone above the debt break point yet. Preferred stock will never really change, so it's still at the 10.3%. But now we need more money than our retained earnings will cover, so we have to issue new common stock, and that's at the 14.3%. And we go ahead and just cost all of that out at the 14.3%. We don't say, well, $36 million cost us 13.7 and 24 really only cost us 14.3. We take a conservative approach, or assume we're going to do one debt issue, and that one big debt issue is going to cost us, or stock issue is going to cost us 14.3%. So you see, because of that increase from 13.7 to 14.3, our overall weighted average has gone up a little bit from 10.1 to 10.4. And then we do the same thing for the next break point. Anything above the debt break point of 120, now what we have is debt has gone up. It was 10% before tax up here, 6% after tax, but now, as you'll see in the example, anything above $54 million is going to cost us 12% before tax, or 7.2% after tax. Cost of preferred stock stays the same. Cost of new common stock is the same as it was up here. It already increased up here. So again, because of that increase in debt cost, our overall weighted average cost of capital has gone up from 10.4 to 10.9%.